Welcome to today's seminar of our Data Science Institute. My name is Frank Lehner. I'm the director of the Institute, and I'm really happy to announce today's seminar speaker, Valerie Turner. So Valerie is a vice president of MD Financial Services, the people who take care of our doctors' money.
That's right.
So they don't run away and happily treat us and prevent us from dying. So you guys are taking good care of their money, and Valerie is thinking about AI and all the impact AI can have on business. Like if you listen to the news, it's going to take over all our jobs and going to take us all into pumpkins, right, and all. So what is hype and what is not and what is real, that's what Valerie is thinking about and going to talk about today, right?
That's right.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So thank you all for coming and allowing me to share our journey and our story with you. Two disclaimers up close at the beginning. So this is a decidedly non-academic treatment of this subject. So if you're hoping for a deep academic dive, there's still time to leave. And the second is I have no background in consulting, so there will be no death by PowerPoint. I have 5 slides with a picture on each one. So if you're hoping for an elaborate PowerPoint multimedia presentation, that's not happening either. So again, you can take your cookie and run if that's what you're hoping for this afternoon. So as said, I've been working at MD Financial for about 6 years, went there in a technology role and then moved over to our corporate incubator. And before that I was at University of Ottawa and I was there for 23 years and I worked in roles in human resources, strategy and technology, and also did a little bit of teaching in the MBA program. So we come at this topic from a point of view of a purely business application of a new technology. And our business is financial services, and what we do is we take care of Canadian doctors and their families so that they can concentrate on providing health care. As you know, physicians don't have a pension plan, any of those things. Their life cycle is one of being in school for a very long time, typically accumulating a lot of debt, and then transitioning into practice where they work extremely long hours and are very, very dedicated to their patients. So one of the interesting things about our program is that it came out of our corporate incubator. So I'll let you guys get settled. Yeah, it's good. We got lots of time, don't worry. So about 2.5 years ago, like many companies, our company formed an incubator to look at disruption. Everyone was worried about quote unquote being Ubered. Some company coming out of nowhere and kind of punching you in the side of the head like Uber did to the taxi industry, and not having seen it coming, what would that mean? So there was a lot of fintechs. There were a lot of talk of disintermediation, things like payments were being disrupted. So our organization wanted to put a small group of people together that would think about the future, think about disruption, think about changes in society, what that would mean for our clients, what that would mean for our business, and look for opportunities in there. And the reason that this is important to this conversation is that typically a project, especially an IT project, as probably most of you know, has a certain arc to it. It has a beginning and a middle and an end, and it walks a very straight path. So you decide as a business that you need to do something to solve a problem. So your problem could be that you need a new student information system because you've redone your programs and you have 6 credits instead of 3, or 3 instead of 6, or 1.5, or whatever it is that you need to do, or your system is end of life. And what you do in that context is you create a project, you create a business case, you talk to everybody to find out what their needs are, you do a requirements analysis, you identify a few products, you do a gap analysis, you put it into production, and away you go. And it takes a couple of years, and what does everybody say around an IT project? Watch out for the scope creep. We can't have any scope creep. If we change our requirements along the way, we're never going to finish this thing, and we're going to have to go back to the board and get more money, and nobody wants that. So projects that come out of the core of a business typically have that culture around them of a start, a middle, a finish, and a really, really predefined path that you walk. So the process that we use in our incubator is very, very different. It's a process where we start by looking at signals and then turning those signals into a product at the end. So what's an example of a signal? If you think back about 2.5 years ago, everyone was talking about this notion of the gig economy. None of us were going to have real jobs. We were all going to have things that we do. So if I'm a graphic artist, I'm going to go on a platform, I'm going to find 2 hours of work here and 3 hours of work here and 4 hours of work here, and I'm not going to have a traditional relationship with an employer. So that was a signal. And how did that play out? There were a bunch of startups down in California that created platforms for everything. If you wanted somebody to park your car in San Francisco, you could hit an app and pull up and they'd take your keys in your car and go park it for you. And presumably somebody did this for a living, went around and parked cars. If you wanted somebody to go through the grocery store and pick out exactly the oranges and the vegetables you wanted, they would do that, right? Instacart, somebody would go do that. They had a disintermediated restaurant model where if you order 5 pizzas, it's not going to Pizza. There's 5 people in their houses making up pizzas, and then somebody goes those 5 places and picks them up and brings them to you. So a lot of this stuff worked, a lot of this stuff didn't work, but those were the kinds of signals that we were looking at, and then trying to look at those and say, okay, what's happening in society? Does that impact our business? And is there anything we should be doing about it? So obviously another one of those signals is, as you referenced, this rise of the machines. You know, the robots are coming, they're going to team up with AI, and it's all over for all of us. We're going to be sitting at home on a basic living wage, and that was going to be it. So what do we do with these signals? So we would look at them and go through an innovation process. And this is what our AI journey has followed. So we take the signal, you think about what does that mean in terms of an idea, and then you think about using a design thinking approach. So what does that mean for your client? It's a client-centric process. So something like a student information system, to take that analogy a little bit further, you would think about only the student experience. What does the student experience on campus when they interact with different administrative units, and you build the system around that instead of the traditional way you would do it, which is I need to be able to register a student and I need to be able to do this. So you look at that very, very, very client-centric view, and then you start creating in the Google Sprint process. You take that idea, so you might have an idea that says I want the student to be able to register whenever they want, wherever they want, whatever classes they want, never mind the programs. Okay, that could be an idea. And then you play it out and you test it, and you run it over a 5-day process where you take the idea, you build out a prototype, an illusionary product, and you put it in front of the student or the client, and then you test it and you get their reaction to it. Do they like it? They don't like it? They hated it, they liked this little part of it, and you go through that iteration, 5 or 6 times until you think you have something there. And I'm simplifying it a little bit. You have to also look at, the feasibility, the business feasibility, the technical feasibility. But the main takeaway is it's about the client fit and the market fit. So that's the process that we use in the lab. And actually, there's only 4 of us, and in 2.5 years, we've brought 6 products to market using that approach. So it does bear fruit if you're willing to stick with it. So one of the signals, I'll just take a bit of water. One of the signals we were following was AI. And in looking at the signals, we always look beyond what's directly in front of you. So a good example of that would be autonomous cars. So autonomous cars is a signal. We think they're coming. There's a lot of research going on around them. But we don't just stop and say, oh, people aren't going to be in their cars anymore. So what does that mean? We think more about how does this impact a gas station? So right now I decide where I buy my gas. Is the car going to decide where it gets its gas? How does this impact the corner store that's attached to the gas station? Because now you're not stopping in to get milk or chips or whatever. The car's going itself, getting its gas, unless it's electric, then it's plugging itself in. But that whole model around the driver in the car starts to break down. So that's really what we try to do, is think about, so what? So we're going to have driverless cars, so what? So now on a trip to Toronto, is the hotel industry going to suffer because people are just going to get back in that car and sleep in it as it takes them to the next place they need to go? All of those kind of what ifs. So we approached AI like that, and we thought, how is this going to impact ourselves, society, and our clients? And one of the first things we looked at back when we first started up the incubator was IBM Watson Oncology. So one of the big signals was, can AI contribute and help with the diagnosis and treatment of cancer? And we thought, wouldn't it be an amazing thing for MD Financial, as a subsidiary of the CMA, to help bring this technology to Canada so Canadians could benefit from this advanced diagnostics and treatment and clinical trial matching and all of those kinds of things. So we did sit down with oncologists from Ottawa, some business people, and some others, and we found that it was just too much to take on. They had had an experience at Sloan Kettering, and it was a long process. It was an expensive process. I think they had 3 cancers that they had managed to get kind of in the system and get trained for. And as much as we wanted to move forward on that, that's an example of an idea that we had to shelve. We may go back to it, but we pivoted away from cancer, and we thought, is there something else we can do with that technology? Is there another problem we can solve and maybe get our feet wet a bit and go back to something as big as cancer later, once we understand what this technology can do? So we thought about the context of what we wanted to test. So we really are passionate about our clients. We care deeply for Canadian physicians and the services that they provide and the way they take care of all of us. So the context we had for our ideas were around, can AI help us better understand our clients, provide a better service, and can it help us transform our business to be more client-centric? So we thought, what can we do with Watson? How do we free up our unstructured, our dark data? How do we create new possibilities? And as you can see, that's a very different question from the question around, I need a new student information system, or I need a new financial system, because you're not really setting a path. It's really the art of the possible is the way we elected to approach this, so that we wouldn't have to worry about providing a product for a certain date that met a specific need that the organization had. So we had 2 challenges. So we installed Watson and we got it up and running, and we developed some use cases. So we sat down with our business leaders and explained to them what we thought AI could do for them. And we said, so do you have any business problems that you think this technology could solve for you that you haven't been able to solve before? So we came up with some really interesting use cases. And we took those use cases and we approached some external service providers, and we started talking to them about our sprint process that I described to you earlier, that we have 6 weeks, we have an idea, we create a product, if it doesn't work, we pivot. And I don't know how many of you have had the extraordinary pleasure of working with a large company and going through a statement of work and an RFP process and the change requests and honestly, the looks on their faces as I sat and explained how we wanted to work. And it took literally months for them to draft these documents that still didn't meet up with what we wanted to be able to do. So that we found to be a surprising barrier, that we just couldn't get our partners to be agile. They really, their processes are very dear to them, and their whole businesses are built around them. That was one of our learnings. And the second one was that So any of you who are in data science, like, just stick it out. These resources are so expensive. In my 20-some year career in technology, I've never paid the kind of rates that I've had to pay for AI and data science expertise. So you're writing your own tickets if this is what you're studying, because there's a scarcity, and when there's a scarcity, then the rates absolutely go up. So you put these two things together and you think, okay, I'm having a hard time dealing with my service providers. These resources are really expensive, and I'll add the third layer, and I'm essentially experimenting. So in a business context, when you spend a lot of money, don't produce anything, and tell your CEO, but you've really learned a lot, that can only happen a few times. And then you're going to have to find another way of earning a living. So we were really thinking about how to solve these problems, because we really knew that we had some potential here with AI. So having been in an academic environment for a long time, my first instinct is always collaboration, because anytime I worked with any of the researchers at Ottawa U, they were all about collaboration, collaborating with people in different countries, different universities. So I sat down with some of our folks at IBM, and I said, we really need to create an ecosystem. We can't do this by ourselves. We can't get access to the right resources. We don't have the right kind of thinking around the table. And it took a period of months, but IBM did stand up an instance of Watson at Queen's, and I don't know if any of you know Don Aldridge, who used to be with IBM, and he's running the Center for Advanced Computing down there. And we sat down with Don and got access to his resources down there. And this is a group of graduate students and postdocs and some professors, really, really brilliant people, that solved our problem around how do we actually do this stuff. We have some good use cases, we have the environment installed, and now how do we actually move this stuff forward? And we did build up some internal muscle with some Carleton co-op students. So one in cognitive sciences and one in biomedical engineering, both of whom have been amazing and have been with us for 2 years now, and have learned a lot and have been invaluable to the team. So then we went looking for a little bit more lift, and we found a startup in Nova Scotia that is in the AI space. So we brought them into our ecosystem. So now we have us, a business with business problems. We have the Center for Advanced Computing at Queen's. We've got a startup that has some AI expertise. We've got IBM. And then we brought Microsoft and another local company to the table to work on blockchain stuff. So they're in our ecosystem, but they're in our ecosystem for blockchain. So we really felt, okay, we have all the pieces to the puzzle now. We're going to be able to actually move forward on all this stuff. So I've kind of framed the business problems or the transformation opportunities in the form of questions. So I'm behind on my slides. There we go. So one of them was an HR issue. So our objective, we have financial advisors, so they're in our regional offices across the country. And we want our clients to have the best experience. So how do we put the best advisors in the chair? How do we have the best people? So we thought we're going to ask Watson to study our talent and figure out why our top performers are our top performance, and how do we recruit and train to that standard. So how would we go about solving that as an AI problem? We also wanted to ask Watson to help our clients make informed life decisions. What would that look like? We also wanted to ask Watson, I'm sure all of you have experienced this in your lives, we have an extraordinary amount of corporate information. Nobody erases anything anymore because storage is so cheap. So you just have document after document after document after document. And I think we all have to accept no one's ever going to erase anything. So this notion of, well, we'll just get them to clean up SharePoint or clean up the intranet, or it's never, never, never going to happen. So we thought we're going to ask Watson to read all of our information and be able to reliably answer questions correctly through different interfaces, through text, through chat, and through interface with some robots. So those were the things that we set out to do. those were the use cases that we thought would be interesting for our first run at AI. So any questions before I push on here? I've dumped a lot on you.
So Watson originally was the cancer analysis?
IBM Watson is a platform, an artificial intelligence platform.
Okay.
Yeah, so it incorporates a whole bunch of different products. There's natural language processing, APIs on sentiment, on personality, a whole bunch of stuff, yeah. So it has a data explorer tool that goes through and tags and organizes all your data, and then it exposes it for use for analysis, I think is the easiest way of putting it, yeah. Yeah.
So when you frame those use cases, was it consulted with the business owner or the business area, or just you guys trying to?
No, we sat with our business leaders and did a couple of days of ideation, and those were the kind of things that bubbled to the top that the business thought would be very, very helpful, and that was suited to this type of technology.
Okay. And also at that time, were they committed to provide the funding for this kind of work, or like how?
So there was some funding in place, and then I went back and got a little bit more funding. Yeah,
And
to be
that's after you already defined the use cases, and then you felt that you needed it.
Yeah, yeah. We had both the use cases and the approach. So I didn't think I was going to be able to move forward without the ecosystem because the costs were just too prohibitive. I didn't feel good about taking that to our senior executives and asking to move forward in an experimental way for the kind of price tags that we were looking at with the traditional approach. Yeah. Yeah.
Could you please explain a little bit more about the unstructured data that the financial had at that point?
Yeah, so a good example of unstructured data is all of the notes fields in our customer relationship management system. So it's just like text where someone will type in, the doctor came in today and wants to talk about blah, 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 blah. Email exchanges between folks in the organization would be unstructured data. Yeah. Okay? Yeah.
I'm interested to know, why did you take the doctors as your client and not the patient as your client?
We don't have a relationship with the patient. So we interface, on the oncology one you mean?
Well, on any medical issue.
So our core business is financial services for doctors. So we have no relationship with patients. On the oncology one, when we went through and we were looking at the client fit, that exactly was the problem. So when we started thinking about who's the client, so we could do the client-centric approach, the client was the patient. And we don't have any ability to interact with patients in the kind of business that we're in. That interaction is done through the physician. Yeah, yeah, and that was it. The client we thought the patient was the client, and then we couldn't figure out how the patient could pay for the service or anything, because in the States, of course, very different because of the healthcare system, but here we got hung up in the ministries of health and we thought we better leave this alone for a little while. We didn't think we could get where we needed to go. Yeah.
So how was the taxonomy you created for this document ingestion process?
That's, I think, a question for later, Burkett.
Okay.
That's one of those deep technical questions that maybe our guys at Queen's can answer for you.
Oh.
Yeah, that's not, unfortunately, I don't go that deep. Anything else before we go into the use cases? I think we're doing good for time. Okay. So we called studying our talent and figuring out why our top talent is our top talent. We had named that Super Advisor. So we partnered with the startup company, Arenda, and asked them to look at everything. And you asked about unstructured data. So we looked at their resumes. We looked at how many meetings do they have a week. We looked at, do they participate in our employee recognition system. We looked at, do they participate in the continuous learning environment that we have. We looked at, are they active on social media. We looked at the email exchanges between themselves and their clients and we used one of the Bluemix APIs sentiment and personality. So we're able to see, do they have a trust relationship with the client? And we came out with this view of those top performers. And what we're doing now is looking at some folks who maybe don't fit that to make sure that there's a difference, because the worst case would be everybody looks the same, then you don't have anything. So the experiment is, is there a delta between these two populations? And then if there is, how do we recruit and train for this standard? The other layer that we're adding to that, because we know it's not as simple as that, is initially, I'm not very hip or anything, so I don't really know what's going on. So we had initially called the second piece of this Tinder Advisor, because we wanted to match the client to the advisor, and I'd heard on the news stuff about Tinder, and I thought it's about matching people together. And then somebody younger and more with it than me said, no, that's more like a one-time, like you really want like a Match.com advisor, right? You don't want a Tinder advisor. There's not going to be a walk of shame here. So I said, okay, I get it. What we want to do here is so we changed it to orchestrated advisor, because that just sounds a little more business-like and appropriate. So we know it's not. No, I know. I really liked it. It really rolled off the tongue, right? Oh, it's Tinder Advisor. But people would look weird that knew what Tinder was, so we had to stop that. So the idea is, we know it's not as simple as having top performing advisors and lower performing advisors. There is this notion of relationship, any kind of relationship where you have a trust relationship. And we've all had the experience, where you go in to buy a car and Bob comes out and they say, oh, Bob's going to take care of you, and you just, there's something doesn't work, right? Like there's not a good vibe between you and that person. So we're trying to capture this. We're trying to figure out what is it that creates a natural chemistry between two people in a financial advisory relationship, not in a personal dating relationship, but in a financial advisory relationship. Because we want to make sure that we're not misinterpreting the data and thinking that these people are all doing really well as advisors because they have people as their clients that they have a harmonious personality match with. So that's the next step of that, is to take the AI to the next level in understanding both the client deeply and the advisor deeply and the relationship and the optimal relationship deeply. Any questions on that? Okay. So the next one we're looking at is the corporate knowledge one. So what we're trying to do is create an environment where you can ask, oh, sorry.
Sorry, so maybe I missed some of your results. So
Yep.
what came out of the talent? Why those people are more talented than not? What did AI tell you?
So we have a fairly deep set of metrics around that talk about, so some basic personality metrics around their entrepreneurial. They have deep empathy. There are some things like that, and then there are some behavior. They're able to establish a trust relationship with their clients. They're compassionate. So we have personality stuff, and then we have some behavior stuff as well.
So that's intriguing that AI told you that. Do you think humans would not have been able to tell you that?
What we're finding interesting is, and again, we're in the experimental stage, both with on a couple of fronts. So there's some other stuff that we're doing that I haven't included today. So how somebody shows up and how they say they show up are often two different things. So even some of the personality tests, I know they're very elaborate and they do a really good job of being, of checking and checking and checking again. But most of us know that if I get a question on a personality test that says, do I like to sit at home and read, or do I like to go out and be with people, we know that one of those is going to label us an introvert and one of those is going to label us an extrovert. So in the same way that a lot of data from Twitter about personality, you can interview someone for a job and they're not going to say to you, I'm a bit of a sarcastic ass. But if you look at their Twitter feed,
About yourself?
yeah, exactly. I know it wasn't on my biography, but I'll add that on. There is something to that, right? That everyone likes to present themselves in their best light. And there are some really interesting analysis now in these APIs that allow us to just scrape the surface just a little bit more around how does the person typically show up. Yeah, thank you.
That analysis on certain politicians' Twitter feeds is very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you need AI to really come to that conclusion. It's not that complex, and there's lots of data, which makes it good. So yeah, the corporate knowledge one we thought. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I had
No.
a question on that topic.
Yeah.
So the idea was actually to look at the best in quote advisors.
Mm-hmm.
And actually derive the set of characteristics that they would have in common.
Yeah, we tried to deconstruct them.
And then, but my question is, how do I know now that if I do have those characteristics, I'm going to be a great advisor?
Yeah, so like this isn't, I understand this kind of the underlying statistical question that you're asking, and again, this is a business context, right? So our plan at this point is measure the top, kind of take them apart and see what's there. Measure the lower performers, take them apart, see what differences there are, measure everybody, and then see, does something stand out for us in terms of, is there a development opportunity that we can have? Is there a couple of recruitment things that we need to just, and again, it's augmented intelligence. It's not the machine deciding. It's a tool for our human resources people to use to help them to understand maybe where there's some gaps or some areas where we can do better. Yeah, it's not a scientific, mathematical kind of an approach, because that's science backwards, right? That approach is absolutely science backwards. So the other thing, we imagined a time when you don't ever have to look for anything ever again as an employee. So you come into work and you think, how much vision care do I have? How much vision care do I have? A client might wonder, what's a TFSA? What's the limit? What was the limit in 2014 for a TFSA? How much maternity leave can I get? How do I go about filling out a drug form? What's the phone number of the office in British Columbia? So you could either type it, ask it, and it would go and get the information. So we saw this as transforming onboarding. So what do you do when you have a new employee? You get the binder out, right? First you gotta look through the binder and make sure that it's right. And then you sit this person down and they try to absorb all of this material that they have no context for. So if instead they went to work the day they showed up and you say, okay, you can go, whenever they had a question, they would just type it in. Oh, I'm at a meeting. What do they mean by the BRTLD committee? Up it would come. And so this is what we're trying to solve for with this, is to take all of our corporate information and have it available through a natural language interface. So the way we've approached this is Watson Explorer allows us to write connectors into our data repositories. So we've written connectors into SharePoint and our SQL intranet and our external facing website. And we're doing a social learning with Watson. So what we're doing, we haven't finished the work yet, but there's a rating system. So if you're a HR professional and you are training Watson and you put a question in and you get a document that has the right answer, you could give it 5 stars. You could give the others no stars because they're not correct. And eventually what Watson will do is say, I'm abandoning these documents because they have no stars associated with them. If I as an employee see that document and I think it's a good document, I can give it 5 stars. But the weight that I have is far less than the weight that you have because you're the domain expert in that area. We took that approach because with the volume of information, we thought we'd never get through it. We couldn't see sitting down 5 people and saying, you're responsible for determining what the right information is. And that's one of the learnings for later, but unstructured data is ugly. It is the most ugly data I've ever seen in my life. You're used to a table where you have date of birth, and it's either going to be valid or there's going to be something weird, but you're not going to find like horse in there, right? It's like, it's a birth date. Unstructured data and dark data, it's somebody's half-finished PowerPoint presentation that they uploaded somewhere to SharePoint, and is it right, is it wrong, is it... And in terms of, just while we're on it, the biggest challenges, it's 100% the data. It's 100% the data. It's not the technology. And what troubles me is that, you know, we have corporate data. When we start to take AI, and hopefully this is a problem that some of you smart folks are working on, in doing this presentation, all I wanted was crystal ball. Here, all I wanted was a crystal ball. And I went on and looked on Google Images and tried to find a crystal ball. And the only crystal balls I could find were men in business suits holding a crystal ball because they were looking to the future, and women dressed like fortune tellers standing around the crystal ball, and some kind of fire pit going in the background. So you think, if you turn AI loose on open source data and let it decide what is what, yeah. So internally we have a problem around data, and I think in general the industry has a problem around how they train these systems. So I'll jump off my soapbox, but it becomes so obvious when you put on your AI hat and you start looking around at data that we got to figure this one out. We got to figure out how to train these systems in a neutral way, in a correct way. So that is our Ask Mindy product, and we've purchased 2 robots. So we purchased a Jibo that is a little social learning robot, and we've purchased a Now, and we're teaching them to interface with these environments so they can actually talk to people and answer questions. Yeah?
Did you encounter a lot of obsolete data? And so, like, how did you approach that problem of having too much data and the data being just completely wrong?
Yeah, so we've got 2 approaches. The first approach we took, and I think we've been defeated by it, was we thought that we could just use the star rating system and eventually it would go away, but there's so much of it. You get rid of 3 documents and 10 more pop up. So unfortunately, I think we're going to have to go through and just select documents and put them in a separate repository and say that's the corpus. It's not the best way of doing it, but I can't figure out any other way of doing it right now. There's just so much of it. It's brutal how much of it there is. And you can't ask people to clean it up because they have jobs to do. So they're not ever going to do that. So the crystal ball, one of the exercises we do with clients to try to figure out what problems we're trying to solve is a pain tree. So we'll bring in a group of clients. So in this case, it was medical students, and we said, tell us, you know, what's painful about being a medical student. And there's apparently a lot of things that are painful about being a medical student. And one of them was the need to, and I'm sure a lot of you as graduate students feel the same way, you have to make a decision and you have to stick with it, and you're not sure what that decision is going to mean. And in medicine, you don't get 4 years into medical school and decide maybe this isn't for me. There's a lot of pressure on them to finish. And when they pick specialties, they don't necessarily know what that means. So we created 2 products out of that. One was a specialty selector navigator that we're going to put into production in March that allows the students to see what does it mean to be a dermatologist? How many residency seats are available? How many hours a week do you work? How many years of residency? Where would I practice? Is it in a clinic? Is it in a hospital? How much money would I make? What environments would I work in? What's the gender distribution? What's the age distribution? And then they really expressed a need to want to create an outcome and then understand how that would unfold. So what we're hoping to do there is allow them to create an outcome that says, if I'm going to be a family doctor in Thunder Bay and I want to have 2 children and I want to have a home and I want to do Doctors Without Borders, and once they drag all that onto their lifeline, what does that actually look like? And compare that to, I want to be an ophthalmologist in Toronto. And what does that look like? So we're working on that, and we're hoping to help them to understand the impacts of some of the decisions they have to make over the next few years of their studies. And the very last, I think I have to advance my slides, learnings and next steps. So there are 2 big things we're trying to do in there. One is Enterprise Lift. It's great to have a small team and to work within our ecosystem and to be working on some use cases, but we really want the whole organization to take on the art of the possible around AI and business transformation. So we're bringing folks in a couple hours a week and having them participate in developing use cases, and if they're technology oriented, doing some coding. And we're finding the robots are very effective draws. Everyone likes a robot, it turns out. So we've got them in a lab and they're more popular than we are, and so that's fine. What?
That's something about you.
It does. And I've learned to live with that, that reality. And the other idea is that these are lower barrier interfaces, right? Everyone likes voice. Google Home and Alexa, everyone's used to yelling at their technology. Hey Siri. So we want to again experiment with that voice interface. And then the other one is prediction. So prediction, in its simplest form, you know, if I work at Bridgehead and I'm a barista and John starts coming in and he comes in every morning at 8 o'clock and he wants a double shot, no fat latte. Within a few days I can probably figure out that he's going to come in and I can create that for him and have it ready when he comes in. And I need a certain amount of data, and that's a pretty low risk proposition. If I make it and he doesn't come in, I'm out a couple of dollars. It's not the end of the world. So we're trying to get enough data to start reliably predicting stuff and get the right data. So questions like if a client leaves, could we have known a month ahead and done something about it? If a key resource is getting ready to leave. And we have good data because we have lost clients and we have lost staff. So we can go back in time and open up that stuff over months or whatever it is and try to see. And it's kind of a good problem to throw AI at, because you can say, okay, tell me what you see in a pattern with all this data that I'm giving you. And the other big one is fraud detection. So we've had human sleuths. One of our financial consultants called me one day when I was heading up our IT security practice and said, I think one of our doctors have been hacked. And I said, well, why do you think that? And she said, I just got an email from him and he signed it all the best. She said, he never says all the best. You know, he never ever wishes me well. And I thought, okay, that's okay, right? He's got a lot going on, so it's not his personal style. And she picked up on that, and sure enough, he'd been hacked. And just that one email, so you think, okay, so we all have patterns, right? Patterns to how we talk, patterns to how we write. And wouldn't it be interesting to be able to do real-time fraud detection to protect our clients' assets as well? So that's really where we're going next. The real learnings, it really isn't magic. You know, every time I see a Watson commercial on TV, I kind of give a silent scream, because it's not running your coffee maker unless you really, really put a lot of time into it. The data's ugly. You need to do a lot of training, a lot of training, and you really need a well-defined use case. It's not something where you can just say, okay, I want to figure out, you have to figure out what you're trying to solve and then work around figuring out the best approach to solving it. So that's all I have. I hope you found it helpful. It's where we've been, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Well, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Yeah.